last week, you said there was a little more grading because the water was puddling or
Yeah, but
something?
it's outside of the footprint of where the turf is going.
Okay.
It's in the northeast corner. There's some standing water, and we just need to work the drainage swell.
Okay.
But as far as the pad for the turf goes, that should be good to go. May potentially use a little bit of fine grading here and there, but it's basically set to drain and shed water off. It's not flat, it's not a football field. It's made to drain, and it drained very well off the pad itself.
So, we're ready for that. And then, how far along have we progressed on Allen Fields? I know they were back working at it today.
Got to the intersection of the entrance, and I think they're 120 feet up. I'd add another fire hydrant. We're at the tie-in point, being 400 feet away from where it was designed. Since we dug it up, we added a fire hydrant right there.
So the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
We're on a plan for this year still. Nobody's kicked us off of it yet, but week to week, we'll let you know. Yeah, so that's what we
I have
hope.
two options there, for sure,
Yep.
ready to go.
So we've got a lot of work to do on the governance and occupying those units, that paperwork, that's gonna be, but we're hoping at tomorrow night's workforce housing committee meeting, that we're finalized on models and colors and all of that, skirting. Yeah, BJ just stepped out, we're supposed to be starting, but the plan will be, we wanna be cutting orders by the end of the month. And that will keep us on track to stage the delivery and start setting them in September, occupy immediately, finish occupying in October.
Talk about this.
It went through PNC for its final approval, I think last Thursday. I think they blessed everything, so it'll have to come back to council. So it's gonna be back and forth, committee and council 6 more times over the next 30 days, but all in the cutting order phase, not in the what do we want to do phase.
Yeah. And did y'all come out with another layout?
The final layout should be the one up on that wall if it's still over there.
That's over.
I got the one, yeah, we got 30 on it.
Yeah, Colfax County through North Central.
So there was a bunch of him and Han about this with DOT, how that's done. Because one of the plans.
I met your wife yesterday.
Yeah,
she kept looking at me, shaking her head over there. Yeah, and I was like, uh-oh, this lady knows I'm for real. And then I didn't say a problem. I said, you do it.
Recording in progress.
So, you know, Run for the Walls Friday.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
As far as the, I'm sure we're ready.
And I searched my emails and I don't have it, I can figure out if it can, pretty much a ton, I can do that.
Well, let's come to order, if you'd please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call for the record. Mayor Lindsay.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Howell.
Here.
Counselor Crane.
Here.
Counselor Weeks is not here. And Counselor Humbert.
Here.
We have a quorum. You may proceed.
Can I please get a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on, item A, discussion on the slash process, contractor and associated charges. Chief Vance.
Mayor Lindsay, members of the council, Ms. Strickland, Mrs. Strickland. Sorry, I messed that up every time. May I make a recommendation that we change the order of the menu items? We have members from H2O Partners online and representatives from Colfax County here to kind of explain that, and I'd hate to waste their time. And we don't have any contractors here for any other additional information or questions, so could we swap the agenda items?
We could table item A, move on to item B.
You would need a motion to table.
I make a motion to table item A and start discussion on item B.
Second.
Roll call vote on item A to table. Mayor Pro Tem Howell.
Aye.
Counselor Crane.
Aye.
And Counselor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Thank you.
We'll start item B, discussion on proposed Colfax hazard mitigation action plan.
Thank you for switching those positions. We appreciate it. We have members from Colfax County and H2O Partners to go into detail about what the hazard mitigation plan is all about, how it came about, and give you a little bit of history and depth of that. When I came on as chief in July, I didn't have a whole lot of perspective about this either. As I understand it, our old hazard mitigation plan was from the Murtaugh administration and quite some years back, and I don't know exactly the status of that, if it got voted in, et cetera. H2O Partners provided us with an opportunity to give some feedback about a hazard mitigation plan as specific to the village of Angel Fire. So we had some interaction online back and forth, and since then they've consolidated that plan. There is a copy of it. It's a pretty lengthy plan. But I'll step aside and allow, remind me, Mr.
Beal.
Mr. Behill from Colfax County to present a little bit more in depth. Thank you.
Good to see everybody. I know it's been a while since I've been over here, and last time things were burning over there, so happy nothing's burning over there. To give you some history, and actually Mr. Weir here gets a lot of credit for how this came about, but following up the Cooks Peak fire especially, but also the Hermit's Calf Canyon era, the county plan needed to be revamped. We didn't really have the money to do that. A partnership was sought with North Central Economic Development. They actually applied on behalf of Colfax County to FEMA for a grant to rewrite the Colfax County Hazard Mitigation Plan. As we discussed the development of that, decided that we were going to, instead of just having a blanket Colfax County Hazard Mitigation Plan, invite all the municipalities to participate as well. The benefit of this is, of course, if we had a county plan, the Angel Fire, any of the other municipalities would be covered under that plan. However, if you saw any sort of funding sources as a result of that plan later on down the road, you would kind of have to go through Colfax County and add that extra step into the process. By making this a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, now it's the Colfax County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Were the village to adopt it, it's the Angel Fire Hazard Mitigation Plan. Thereby cutting the county out of the process. If you guys choose to pursue any sort of funding opportunities, you can apply directly. And so it streamlines it, but also just provided the opportunity to provide a single plan, but one that is comprehensive for the entire county, including the municipalities, and saving money in the process. Your plan was set, actually I think it expired last summer, would have been the date. They're generally good for about 5 years. Kelly Murtaugh originally wrote the last version of your plan. The city of Raton, their plan expired last October, and of course, the county plan was expired, and the other municipalities never even had one. So that was the way we went about this. As far as the funding came FEMA through North Central Economic Development. A whole committee of us selected the actual, the contractor, which is H2O Partners. And then they began working on the development of the plan, including all the steps and processes. Excuse me. So as far as the money is concerned, it's all taken care of. It was actually a 90-10 or 90-10% match as far as the grant opportunity. That 10% I was able to make up in kind. So there's actually no money coming out of pocket for any of the municipalities or Colfax County. So it's entirely not paid for yet, still going to be paid for. H2O Partners still have a couple more steps to do until they get the final check. But they've been a great company to be working with for developing this plan. Now what a hazard mitigation plan does, it identifies, of course, the major hazards that potentially could impact a community. As part of the committee, including representation from Angel Fire and the other municipalities, we essentially make up the whole list. Here's all the stuff that could happen to us, and here's kind of the priority list of here's how bad this one is versus here's how bad this one is, and the potential impacts involved with that. That makes up the bulk of the 500 and whatever pages of this plan. After that, then comes the identification of potential projects down the road that each one of the municipalities or the county as a whole could pursue in order to provide mitigation for potential future efforts. I believe that's section 24. It's towards the end of that plan, but that lists out each one of the communities' suggested courses of actions. I believe Angel Fire submitted about 30-something potential mitigation projects to be listed in there. Most of those involved with disaster preparedness. There were a few involving flooding, relooking at some floodplain stuff, emergency notification, communication, fuels treatment. There's a whole range of stuff that were submitted on behalf of Angel Fire as far as potential mitigation projects. So I hate to say this to sound negative, but the bulk of that document is really just stuff and fluff. And it's going to sit on the shelf and no one's going to really read that. If a disaster happens, I'm not breaking out this document and going to flip through and go, oh, wildfire, how bad is that going to be? That gets ignored. The purpose of this document really is, one, sets up that plan of potential projects, and that's why that last section, again, 24, but maybe I'm incorrect on that. That provides the template for the village itself. Here's some projects we can pursue, and you can start setting up some waypoints, some gauging stations on how you progress through that. The second part of this document, it existing, opens up a whole new range of funding that were previously unavailable to the municipality as far as both disaster mitigation and disaster recovery. Starting first with disaster recovery, typically the A and B funds, the normal disaster recovery funds, are available once an emergency is declared. It goes through the governor, goes up to the president's office, gets signed, and FEMA gets involved. Those recovery funds are generally how to replace whatever was lost to the exact standard of what it was lost at. So if you have a flood that comes through and wipes out a bridge, that money can allow you to replace that bridge with the same kind of bridge that was there. The problem being with that is, in the county we experienced this, we had some old antique bridges that were not up to current engineering standards. They got wiped out in a flood. We applied, FEMA came, took a look and said, well, we can't help you because we can't replace an old ancient bridge that's not up to modern standards. So you're not available under those A and B funds. Having a hazard mitigation plan opens up a whole range of other potential monies to now, if you have a disaster that takes out that bridge, you can replace it with a better, newer, fancier, all the modern conveniences bridge, as long as you're able to tie it in with that mitigation effort of, if we build this thing back more robust, it's going to survive the next flood, versus putting in a bridge that's going to get wiped out again in the flood. So that's step one. The the purpose of having a hazard mitigation plan. It opens up those other funding revenues. Step two, it opens up a whole range of pre-disaster mitigation funds. And there's the last pages of that document actually lists a whole range of the alphabet soup of both state and federal agencies that have funding available for disaster mitigation. And so again, it's a good template. Once you start looking at that project, you punch through that list on the back and say, okay, well, we have an issue with our dam over here. Bureau of Reclamation has this funding source available. If you have a qualified hazard mitigation plan, we can start pursuing funds on re-engineering that dam in order to meet modern standards. And so that's the nuts and bolts of why a hazard mitigation plan is really important. One, yes, it does set up the template and the guidelines for how you're going to pursue this. But two, the more important thing is the funding sources it opens up. And with that, we'll stand for any questions.
Chief Vance, do you have anything to add to?
What about adoption of, or modification of that hazard mitigation plan? If we decide to adopt it and later on down the road, we want to add, change, or delete to any of those portions, are there any implications, reasons why we can't make changes to it?
No, not at all. So you can file addendums to the hazard mitigation plan within that 5-year period where it is a valid plan. Part of the plan does call for meeting at least annually to discuss the plan, discuss what actions have been taken up to date, what actions might be considered, what ones are going to get kicked down the road. And then, of course, as you approach that year 5, truthfully, before that year 5, probably year 3, year 4, you start looking at, okay, we're going to completely rewrite this plan. What were we able to successfully accomplish? What do we need to put into the next plan? And what changes have happened in that time, especially as far as has a new disaster potential arose? One example of which would be if suddenly you had a large influx of some industry that was storing much more hazardous chemicals in your county than were previously before, that might be something you want to consider in the new plan.
And you mentioned a 5-year expiration on that. Does it just have to be renewed and voted upon each 5 years for modifications and review?
It'll be essentially need to be rewritten while the bulk of the material stays valid. A lot of times FEMA and the state have different standards 5 years from now. And so it'll need to be rewritten according to the standard that is in place at that time of the rewrite. And that really is kind of the bulk of the work, is when FEMA changes their mind, keeping your paperwork up to date with what they want.
Thank you. Peyton, thank you for joining us online. Do you have anything to add that we haven't already covered?
No problem at all. I do not have anything to add.
Yes, sir.
Does it have anything to do with resources that we have?
As far as,
Let's say, like, vehicles stationed here. Would we then have, it's multi-jurisdictional, so does it take into account resources everywhere and then require funneling of resources in a particular direction because of the hazard?
so this isn't an actual disaster response plan.
Okay.
That would be included in like emergency operations plan or something along those lines. This is really looking at what are the potential disasters out there and what mitigation efforts we can put in place before that time in order to address that. And when we go back to the resources part, you may say, looking at the village of Angel Fire, we think this area has a particular fire danger higher as opposed to this other area. And looking at it, we don't have the water infrastructure to support that increased fire danger, you know, if that's up here on the hill or up on the back of the ski slope. And so looking at how do we apply for funding for additional resources to improve that water infrastructure. It's even as for Colfax County, we've identified some areas where we don't have adequate fire support, and so part of our plan calls for new stations to be built to service those areas in particular. And so as far as the resource question, yeah, that can be addressed, but it's not as far as how to move the pieces around the table if the disaster is actually happening.
Okay. Now, does that mechanism then, let's say we do have a shortfall in one area, and we end up, an accident happens, then does it point the finger saying, hey, we didn't address it, or didn't do as the recommendation that this plan said? Are we then liable?
No, this is really a hold harmless document in that sense. Because it's not, the actions that you're recommending and you're suggesting we're going to try and look at aren't fitting in with like full obligation on behalf of the municipality. It's more of a wish list. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do this?
Okay.
And as a result of that, it's not something someone can come back and say, well, you guys said you could build another station. Well, yeah, if you had infinite money, you could build that station.
Right.
However, this document just said, hey, if we can find money somewhere, we'd like to build that station.
So would this be something like our right-of-way thinning project on the evacuation routes we need to know is a known issue? That would be something that would be part of the Angel Fire subset of this plan essentially, that we would use this mitigation plan to go try to find grant monies to accomplish that project, or is that a bad example?
Yes, that is a great example. In fact, that is listed in the Village of Angel Fire's 32 steps. One of them is evacuation routes and preparedness and improvement of evacuation routes.
So what I wanted to add to that is, thank you, Mr. Vio, appreciate the context and the depth of that history behind it. Councilor Humbert had approached me a little while back about part of the comprehensive plan. And like anything else, like any monstrous project, you kind of have to take it in small bites. So what I really liked about the plan from HGO Partners is it put everything as like a general outline and kind of listed everything against the wall about what we would need to address. And then as we would need to address each item one by one, then we could tackle those in smaller projects. If we want to talk about floodplains, and we could talk about floodplains and make an addendum to that. Floodplain language, whatever the next steps would be. So what I really liked about it is the general outline, and it kind of gives us a template to start from, because right now we don't have that in place.
So we should expect to see a review of this document with our specific recommendations at some point at council then for adoption, is the way we're headed here?
Well, as
So
I,
it'll be on the agenda for the 27th meeting for you to approve.
Got it.
And just kind of on the note of what he was referencing, so those courses of actions that are defined in that document, if you go the full 5 years without accomplishing any of them, it's not a negative for reapplication of the hazard mitigation plan. So it's not going to count against the village or count against the county if we, in the 5 years' time, accomplish none of this, because again, most of these courses of action are balanced on potentially outside sources of funding instead of being tied to annual budget or any of those other considerations.
But it will help us with outside funding, being able
Yes.
to say, we have this project included in our official hazard mitigation plan.
one request that I had from Mr. Vigil or from H2O Partners is, could we get a consolidated list of all the information that pertains specifically to the Village of Angel Fire? It is a very large document, and as I started to scroll through it, I would get so far before I'd find something with Angel Fire. So would H2O Partners be able to produce a document that's maybe 40 pages long that was information specific to Angel Fire?
I'll be able to do something for that, and basically, I can do a combined search function and condense some of that stuff, but it's not an issue.
Okay. And I think it'd be much easier to ingest rather than looking at that large document.
So we have the document to send to you guys electronically. By the way, Thomas, they don't have the paper copy because it was so big, it was gonna be like a waste of paper.
Yeah,
To print that off.
it's a lot.
Yeah, so I think we did send the electronic copy out, but we didn't want to waste paper. So we didn't print 5 copies of 500 pages.
So really my intention was to have them come up and explain the plan better than I could have, and just give you guys the opportunity to take a look at it and see if it's something that we wanted to pursue. I think it is a good template to start off with, but I don't have any other agenda other than to present it to council and see what you guys, what your thoughts are. Thank you.
Thank you.
For final note, I will say, Colfax County has accepted the document, the Village of Eagle Nest, City of Raton, and I believe it's on the agenda next for Springer and Cimarron this week or next week. But, several others have already gone ahead and approved it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, appreciate you.
So if that wraps up item B, we'll move back to item A, open discussion on the slash process, contractor, and associated charges.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I
sir.
make a motion to bring item A back to the table.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council,
We're gonna vote real
You
quick.
have to vote on this.
Was that Counselor Humbert who did the second? Very well. Okay. Roll call vote to bring item A back. Mayor Pro Tem Howe,
Aye.
Counselor Crane,
Aye.
and Counselor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Manager Weir, Mrs. Strickland, thank you for rearranging the order. Today we wanted to discuss the slash process. There have been many questions posed to us from the slash program about how to handle commercial contractors versus residents, and really just open up a dialogue between local contractors and the fire department to see if there's things that we can address publicly to get some resolution and perhaps improve the slash program. Captain Romo and Lindsay Reed and everybody at Slash and Wildland has been working really hard to streamline that process. We've introduced a new electronic form. People are able to fill that out online before they go over there to drop off Slash. Today they're spreading a whole bunch of gravel, at least starting that, to make that process a little bit easier, not have cars stuck in mud so much. So we're really working hard to improve that process. But part of that is we've had questions about whether we can take stumps in, if we could perhaps make the dropping off pine needles a little bit easier, and what the current charges are, et cetera. So we have a new administrative policy that you have before you. It's about a 4-page document. Captain Romo and Lindsay Reed worked really hard on improving that. So just wanted to stand for any questions and open up the dialogue to the public to see if there were things that we can work on.
What was the concern of the commercial haulers? Or is there a specific problem we're running into?
I can address that. At one point, this was several years ago, Manager Mitchell had changed in other words, there was the slash pickup trucks, the grapple trucks would pick up at every lot, regardless of who put it in the street. If a contractor was hired to thin the lot, then they were no longer eligible for pickup. The contractor was then required to haul it. And I had some discussions with him at the time because the lot owners pay the same mitigation fees that everybody else does, and whether you hire a contractor or not to drag it up to the street really shouldn't determine how it gets picked up. And then I also saw some abuses. So a contractor's hired, but the owner just fills out the permit and leaves the contractor out of the loop, and then when they come to pick it up, they come pick it up. There's been some workarounds in a few places. So just to kind of clean up that, I noticed on this that you're limiting the amount of slash that can be picked up annually.
Mr. Mayor, that's actually an ordinance.
That has been an ordinance. So is this a rewrite or is this the ordinance?
It is not the ordinance, it's a rewrite of our it's a rewrite of our administrative policies and how we internally handle process, so it's not a rewrite of the ordinance. The ordinance is still the ordinance, we haven't made any proposal to change ordinance.
I
A
guess
lot of the same information is just reformatted.
it's just reformatted, basically.
Is it department ordinance?
Well, there are things in there that we didn't have in place before, that we have added to. The original document that was the administrative policy for slash was about a page long, and so we've added some information.
So, yeah, so this is a rewrite.
Yeah, but this is the policy, not the ordinance.
Okay, I
This
understand.
is a policy, not the ordinance.
So that is in the cubic yardage is in the ordinance.
I'm pretty sure it is, yes.
it is.
I can present a couple of examples just for discussion, and that is, like, on one hand, I don't know what the true spirit, I wasn't here when the original ordinance was written, or when the original policies were written, or when the slash program has come about, and it's gone through different iterations with different departments, et cetera. All I can do is look at it objectively now from what we have in front of us. And so some of the dialogue has been that the original intention was to thin lots, to allow homeowners to be able to take slash, have it disposed of them. So maybe that's now, in relation to the defensible space ordinance, some cleanup of limbs around their homes, cleanup of dead and down timber around their property, et cetera, and be able to take that off and drop it. The other extreme end of the bookend would be a commercial contractor who comes up and pushes trees over, stump and all, and loads them up on a flatbed trailer and drops off that type of slash. So the first example I gave would result in a pretty minimal yield of slash, and that's something that we are geared up for and have the enough personnel and equipment to process. Whereas if we went the extreme other example and every contractor did that, tipped trees down and brought stump and all, would require many more man hours on our behalf to be able to process that, cut the stump off, delimb those logs, et cetera, and then we're left with a much greater volume of slash. So I honestly don't know what would happen if we said, let's go to that extreme bookend and bring us all the trees you can from one way to the other, but we would like to apply some common sense and have some restrictions on what is brought to us for slash. And one example of that is if you're gonna bring us a stump, don't have the tree connected to it, because then that requires us to remove the stump for that, because we may allow the stump to dry for a year or so before we burn it, because it'll burn much more cleanly if it's dried out, whereas we might be able to process the tree. It's just little things like that. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye at surface level.
And currently though, so that's like and I believe that's the ordinance that stumps, you only accept stumps up to a certain diameter,
10 inch,
10 inches in diameter.
that's in ordinance also.
But is that through the slash program, or is that in the solid waste? Because from what I understood, the slash didn't accept stumps at all, and you had to pay to get rid of stumps.
You want me to answer it?
Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so that is a kind of a duty of the solid waste department, and they only take up to a certain amount. I think it's like a 1 foot by 1 foot diameter. And the reason being, our stump grinder at the time, it would just roll the material, and there was no way to get rid of it. They did essentially bury it, and we had that issue with in the pit. Since then, we fixed that. We burned all the stumps that were there, so yeah, it is there. And I misspoke earlier with the question you had, Mayor, about it being an ordinance, or in the village ordinance about picking up the 25 cubic yards. It's not in there. When Manager Weir had approached myself and Chief Vance, he wanted them to be kind of apples to apples. Our policy and our permit and everything that we sent out to the public was in line with the ordinance, so it's not in there.
The ordinance doesn't have a limitation on
No,
cubic
sir.
yardage.
I spoke too soon, I'm sorry about that.
Well, that was the conversation I had with Manager Mitchell years ago. So I guess just a few, and I've expressed these to the manager and to the chief, but number one, we want to encourage people to thin lots, to thin defensible space. We know from experience that if you go a little heavy-handed, you get inundated with slash. Cause you know, you just keep up with the people that are basically doing the right thing.
Correct.
And probably new construction.
Yep.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to have and enforce, because I do believe the ordinance does dictate the size of the material. You know, but I think it reflects what's on here, 6 foot in length,
Yes, sir.
limbs, so
4 inch
so
diameter.
that you can handle it. So I don't think that's unreasonable to enforce that, since they're dumping it, I say free of charge. Again, everybody pays that wildfire protection fee. But I don't wanna discourage volume. Quite frankly, I mean, if someone has a 10-acre lot and they wanna clean it, we're gonna have to figure out how to help accommodate them the best we can. As I was explaining to Manager Weir too, you know, there's only so much you can do, only so much you can pick up in a year with the staff and the trucks that you have.
Yes.
So, you know, people may wanna have that option to haul it themselves, so it's not just piled up and sitting around, but I've always felt like that, you know, these people have been paying that fee for years, and that's what it goes towards, and so I got frustrated with Manager Mitchell when he arbitrarily determined that contractors were not allowed to have, to provide that service for the homeowner. So that's one thing, and then the other thing is too, I think it's a little, and I don't know how to best handle it, cause I understand the challenges with the stumps and the pine needles. But again, to have them to start segregating it between not only the material, but departments. And we've seen illegal dumping with stumps.
Yeah.
We've seen people burying stumps.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah, and so I would like to see if there's anything that you can think of that we can do to encourage people to bring this. I know the fee for stumps is extremely high. Kurt might be able to answer. Kurt, what has Ben charging per stump if he accepts one to dispose?
Since I've been on the job, he hasn't accepted any stumps.
And at the time, it was, I wanna say, it was $100 a stump. So he basically deterred everybody from bringing them that way.
Yeah.
And it was segregated to just like a 1 foot by 1 foot area, you know. We talked about that, you know, the green stumps are pretty hard, but we did a test fire last week, or the week before, because I was out last week, and you know, we did it in the ACI, and it really burned a big green stump that was brought in. You know, that was a tree that was fallen over, you know, by one of the department members. They brought the stump, and we burned that, and it burned well in the ACI, so, you know, we could look at that, but you know, I agree with you. I think it's all in or all out, you know, and Slash department needs to handle it as well. We can't just segregate it to other departments, or maybe a fee. I don't know. The fee was brought up for pine needles, because you know, Ben does charge for the pine needles. We've had discussions, myself and Chief Vance with Ben about that, and you know, we are looking at ways to fixing it, but we thought we would have a work session and talk about it.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, again, that's over here. I think let's find some solution to these issues.
The vast majority of people we're trying to get to participate in this program are gonna not be here.
Yeah.
They're gonna be in Dallas, they're gonna be in Albuquerque,
Yes.
they're gonna be in Phoenix, wherever it is, so. Also, well, I think we have a pretty understanding, this program is pure cost, right? It's we have to get rid of this material in the most efficient way possible. We also have to do it, we don't have a choice, so whatever changes we can recommend that's gonna make it easier, if fees need to be associated, if stumps need to go somewhere else. I am about to embark on thinning my own, I bought a new lot, and so I'm gonna have to do some work to it. So the easier we can make it, provided we're collecting enough fees to adequately keep the program running.
Yes, sir.
And growing, because I think we all anticipate that program is gonna grow over the next couple of years as more people come into compliance with our new ordinance, is the hope.
We talked about more staffing, you know, possibly, you know, at some of the meetings, and then, you know, with Manager Weir, and, you know, we might look at that too. Right now, Wildland's helping out with Slash, but what if we're busy with fires or deployed somewhere? We're probably not gonna be able to keep up with what we have. And right now we are, and you know, you guys seen what we've done,
And that's all because of my guys, the Wildland and Slash guys. And not just them, you know, the community members, yourself, everyone, Kurt, everyone chipping in, you know, I think it takes a village and we're doing that, you know, so.
We do have to commend you on getting that pile, the backlog
Yes, sir.
dealt with, so I appreciate you doing that.
I wanted to send it, like we said, all at once, but then we started looking at all the stuff in there, and we didn't know what was in there. That was 15, 20 years plus of material, so we didn't want to put anyone in harm's way. There being an ordinance in there or something, or foreign material, and we just segregated the piles and burned them in increments, and it worked really well. But that was on a good season. We were here, the conditions were right. What if we don't have, we're in red flag, extreme fire conditions, and everyone's just out on fire assignment, you know, we are looking at that, and I appreciate everything.
I see you've modified the dates from the previous ordinance. It used to wrap up October 1.
Yeah.
Now November 1 is
November.
great. I think if there was some policy in there that if Chief Vance or Captain Romo determine, you know, in other words, why cut it off November 1? If we get one of those Novembers that you can still be working, I'd just as soon leave it to them to decide when the cutoff is as opposed to the administrative policy.
So those dates currently are in ordinance, and so we do need to rewrite the ordinance to pull that out, but I agree, it should be something discretionary with some level of public notice.
Well, and I think Jake's right though, I think ordinance is October 1.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
And in here,
They've
added
changed it to November 1.
Yeah, that's why, you know, when manager, we were wanting me to make an apples to
This
apples.
is what, I mean, we're trying to work on what we want things to be.
No, agreed, and this year, we could have hauled Slash all year, quite frankly.
Yeah, it was pretty.
So I, you know, again, if there's reasons to shut it down, if it gives you the opportunity to catch up with the backlog, maybe, or if it's better for it to come in slow and steady, but, to Jake's point, I mean, if the weather allows, I don't wanna discourage anyone from thinning.
Yeah,
I wanna make it as easy on them as possible, one-stop shop. And I'd like to see, again, Jake's gonna clear his own lot, but I know numerous people that think they're gonna clear their own lot, and they get started, and it's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. They need
And so-
contractors.
And they need contractors, and so I just wanna cooperate with those contractors that are doing that work, and make it easier for them, and not for them to, game the system, in other words, get one owner permit and dump all
Yeah.
summer on that same permit, or bring stuff from out of the valley on that permit, that sort of thing. I think there needs to be, again, some enforcement, get those loads, don't accept them otherwise, or fine them if it does come in with, you know, like you said, push over a tree and just bring it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and if they're bringing things from out of the area, out of the village limits, but, no, I think cooperation and making it as easy as possible, which I know makes more work for you, to make it easier on the public.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a little bit of context and just kind of piggyback off of what Captain Roma said. Thank you, sir. And that is, we've approached this with caution when we were writing the DSO. We approached it with caution, and now as we proceed, just to keep in mind an example that he brought up, if we deploy 2 teams for wildland, we're left with 3 personnel behind. So we have to account for sick leave and have to account for vacations and things like that. Potentially, we could be in a situation where we have 1 or 2 people remaining in Slash. So I would hate to ever get in a situation where we were asked to deploy. We had a deployment request here recently to the Iron Mountain Fire down in the Gila Wilderness. Captain Romo was able to spool up a couple of personnel and send a tender out. That one did end up getting canceled, but that was the potential to have a crew out and leave the workload behind. So we always have to be able to account for that building up of Slash, and that's typically what we've used the winter season for. And that's why we do shut down. We have to do PM on our vehicles. We have to be able to account for any backlog. If we did send everybody out and we get a whole bunch of Slash, we would need that winter downtime to be able to catch up. And that's the best time to burn, when there's a lot of snow on the ground. So that's how we've utilized that and looked at it as a buffer. So the hesitation to open year round has been because if we do have a really extreme year, worst case scenario, we have to wait we have to have a way to catch up.
Well, and I don't, let me correct myself, nobody's suggesting you need the winter downtime, it's perfect for burning. I guess what we keep tripping over are things that get put specifically in ordinance that are a problem for us to go back and change. So I would say if we're gonna modify the administrative ordinance, or the administrative policy and the ordinance, that we put that end date on one of you two guys, or whoever your predecessors are 20 years down the road, that whoever the person in charge is of burning, they're gonna determine, hey, it's October 20th and we're done. We'll make a village posting and be done with it. But if we can go to November 20th, I see no reason to tie our hands by sticking it in ordinance the way they did before, I guess, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, just to paint the wall green, the things that we're kind of all in agreement. We're able to take pine needles, we're able to take stumps within reason. I think we should have some definition and discussion about what the sizing is for those. And then what we don't have is a payment portal. So we don't have a way to charge, we don't have a current process or equipment or those types of things to allow us to charge. Mr. Epler has a payment portal in process right now for solid waste, and maybe we can kind of borrow that process of what they have, but we have to solve that before we just say, start bringing us stumps. But we're open to that idea of bringing in stumps, and I guess we're open to changing some of the language in that for as far as the dates. And I think we're all in agreement, we just all needed to get around the same table and point these things out and identify what we need to work at. So if you guys have other recommendations of stuff that we need to work on or things you don't like, you know, if you don't mind reviewing this document or whatever, then we can move forward. If you wanna make a recommendation that we put something before council, like a new ordinance or something, then we can do that as well.
So, Mr. Mayor, my intent is to rewrite this ordinance to come back before council, to include some things, and one of the things that I think is needed is, you know, we have size limitations on slash if we're gonna pick it up. But we really need those size limitations even if it's being dropped off. Because if we bring in the example I used with the mayor earlier was a 60-foot tree, and somebody pushed it over with a bulldozer and put it on a trailer and dumps it, we can't just burn that. Now we have to put in a lot of work to pull the limbs off that, to remove the stump from it and all these things. And so it becomes a matter of, you know, if we want to do that, we can, but it's going to take additional staff, additional cost. We're going to have to raise the fees. Or if we just say, you know, you need to bring them in 5 or 6 foot sections, you know, and anything bigger, like the current, anything bigger than 4 inch needs to be stripped of its branches and those types of things. I think then we can work with that. And you know, again, I agree, we shouldn't be giving giving two different sides of the story. Yeah, we want everybody to bring their slash in, but wait a second, now you gotta stop because either you're a contractor or it's too much or it's a stump instead of a branch. I think we should be focused on trying to get all the fuel out of Angel Fire we can and in here, so we wanna make it consistent and easy, but there are costs associated with this, and the funding we have right now is not gonna cover, potentially, is not gonna cover a lot of the costs and a lot of the work we may have to do if we don't set some sort of size limits on what's brought in.
Well, size limits I think is fine, for handling purposes, but as far as quantity,
Yeah.
I don't want the fire adaptive committee to go to all this work to get people to bring stuff in and just tell them you can't bring it in. To me, it's, again, counterproductive.
Well, I think we're all in agreement, we're just trying to avoid the transfer of labor.
So I think it's only fair that, and again, without the ordinance in front of me, but I know at the pit, or for the gravel trucks, there's specific rules as to what they will and won't pick up. Is that already an ordinance at the pit as far as what you're allowed to dump?
In ordinance? Can you speak to the ordinance for itself? I do know that in our slash policy, we don't allow debris in it, it can't have a lot of dirt in it.
Right.
garbage, et cetera.
So
It
in
has to
other
be-
words, I think it's perfectly reasonable to set limitations on length. If it's a certain diameter, it has to be limbed, those sort of things, again, to make it easy to handle on your end. I'm not in favor of pushing trees over, throwing them on a truck, dropping them off for use process.
So, current ordinance, all slash over 4 inches in diameter must be de-limbed and cut into lengths of no more than 6 feet long.
So again, those things just need to be enforced. Either turn them away at the site, don't pick it up, or some kind of fine structure if they wanna dump it. So I think we're in agreement there. I wanna make it easy on the guys. I don't want you running chainsaws all day long, just getting it to where you can burn it. So I think we're all in agreement there.
Yeah. So the current, Mr. Mayor, the current ordinance, two things that probably need to be removed, because paragraph F says pine needles are not part of the slash program, and paragraph G says stumps are not part of the slash program. That's why solid waste handles them currently. So that would need to be removed out of the ordinance. And I think Councilman Crane is right. I guess the way I read this before, the ordinance is really designed around us picking up the slash. It doesn't really speak specifically on whether you drop it or not, but it could be read that way because the actual, it talks about the requirements, 4 inches diameter and all that. And then, and that's in the prior paragraphs. And then paragraph E says slash for pickup should be placed where it can be safely picked up, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't read it this way before, but I think Councilman Crane's right. Currently, in the current ordinance, we're not supposed to be accepting slash that has, with a diameter greater than 4 inches, that's not de-limbed.
And that's how I'd always understood it to be. Again, I haven't hauled slash personally in years, but I used to haul a bunch. And so I think that's fair, easy to move on from that point. And also too, you know, and it was just in the last few years that Wildland, the fire department took over the slash program. So when Ben was able to segregate things, between solid waste, what was accepted, what wasn't, but it was still one stop. So now that the two departments involved, obviously whatever we can do to help the public out there. And then again, I'm just not personally in favor of contractor-specific rules. I think we just need to have a set of rules, and if people choose to hire someone to help them do it, I think that's great. The 25, how many yards does a slash truck, how many yards a full grapple truck load, how much yardage do you consider?
About 25.
So you're basically proposing a 2-acre lot gets one pickup.
Well, but
I mean, that's 2 trees.
But that's not in the ordinance, we've decided.
No, I'm
right?
saying
The
that's
cap?
here.
Oh, I see.
That's, we're a little confused because we're going back and forth between this and the ordinance. So in here, I saw a recommendation, 1, contractor-specific rules, and 2, even if not, limitations annually to 25 cubic yards on lots 2 acres or smaller, and 50 cubic yards on 3 acres or.
I could see if you wanted to put if you're just putting the cap in there to make sure that one contractor doesn't come in and apply for a permit at the beginning of summer and then clean 100 lots on that one permit, right? That's, you know, they need to be tracking that a little better, but some way to track to make sure, because ultimately that's gonna tie in to make sure that that contractor then when he shows up tomorrow, that's Angel Fire slash, not Black Lake slash or Eagle Nest slash, right? That we're paying to get rid of our own material.
Well, my concern here is that this is saying that proposed lot size, this is just, even if you do it yourself as a homeowner and the truck goes to pick it up, they're only gonna pick up 25 cubic yards.
And I think, to his point, you could run into the same problem there. One of the lots I'm about to embark in has never been touched before. It's gonna generate a lot of material, and if it was higher up on the mountain, more material still. So putting a cap in there, what is it you're trying to get with the cap? What are you trying to save the village by having that cap in there? Because I agree with the mayor, we wanna make this as easy as we can for a homeowner to get rid of everything they need to get rid of, whether they're doing it themselves or whether a contractor's doing it. So I guess what's the intention behind the caps on, based on a certain size? What were you going for there?
Well, I wanna, remind everybody that we didn't write this policy, that were
Okay.
just modifications to
Got it.
what we presently had. So I'm sure there were reasons why they came up with cap limits, but your example, points that out. If there is a contractor that is thinning out multiple lots, and especially outside of the village of Angel Fire, and relying on the slash program to pick up all the slash off the lots, there's that's easily abused.
Right.
And so, you know, then our slash program is following around those lots. And again, we want it all thinned out, but we don't know what doors we're opening by just
For sure.
leaving it wide open. So again, it goes back to how much slash can we process? Because when those trucks are out picking up, they're not back processing slash, so we have to balance that labor to do those acts. So by having a cap per lot, then we're at least keeping it in check, that when we go to a lot, we know that we were there yesterday, we know that we picked up 25 yards of slash, and then the permit says one address, and then we go to a separate address, then that's different. But limiting it to that lot at least gives us an idea, and I don't know that we're not open to larger limits for those lots, or whatever, maybe it's 2 pickups, or whatever it is, but I think having a cap on there does reduce the potential for abuse.
But your theory then is that you picked up at this location, and that contractor to get one over on the slash program came and reloaded from another site at that same location? That's what you're thinking is happening there?
Well, if it's a
More
combination.
drop-off than pickup. Pickup is a lot easier to manage than drop-off, because right now, we have contractors bringing in,
Right.
because they don't wanna put it there or whatever, it's in their way, and they don't wanna wait on us to come pick it up, so they bring it in, which I don't know, we wanna discourage that either.
No.
And they bring it in, we don't know where they're bringing it from.
Sure.
They could be bringing it in from anywhere.
Well, and I don't wanna, so let's just say there's a contractor that gets 110 acre lots under contract in one summer, and they thin those, I mean, that's 1,000 acres cleared, and I understand the strain that would put then on you probably couldn't handle that, much less that plus everybody else in the village.
We wanna be able to service the taxpayers of each and every lot, but I love that example and marching that through, because if the burden was placed on the fire department or the slash program to pick up all 100 acres of that slash and be unlimited, that one single project would tie up the slash program for the rest of the summer.
So, but I don't think that's abuse either. I think that's what we're wanting to have happen. So we may need to look at it from another perspective, where dumping remains free, but we may have to start charging to pick up with the grapple truck, because I don't think it's fair to have someone that has a 1 acre lot, but it has 100 cubic yards of slash, and you're only willing to pick up 25. Or if a contractor does it, not willing to pick it up at all. I think it should just be by the load that we can charge. So in other words, we offer that service. If you get to the road, we will pick it up at $50 a load or whatever it is.
But the first load to the homeowner is free, but everything after that, it has a charge on it or
something. In other words, I think that's how you're gonna solve that, because there is some abuse, but I don't consider aggressively thinning properties abuse.
This is the same abuse though as the solid waste. We know we end up with trash in our dumpsters that are not ours, but it's just the cost of doing business. You have to have those dumpsters here.
I want to offer another view of that. Like, we built the defensible space ordinance with this idea in mind, that if you call us out and we do an assessment on your lot for your home this year, and we go out and make a recommendation that you should make XYZ changes to your lot, and if you bring it out and it's accessible to our grapple truck, we'll come out to your lot and we'll pick it up, and that services the homeowner. That services the taxpayer, the people that are paying the wildland fees. And that's kind of where our mindset was when we were looking at supporting the
And
DSO.
that's in the perimeter of the structure. So even on a large lot, it's not gonna generate any more than on a smaller lot.
Right, and so those are small bites that at current operation, we can support. It takes one contractor to come in and list multiple lots and tie up the grapple trucks for weeks and weeks and weeks, because we're trying to support a contractor in their venture to make money or to profit off of that, rather than being available to the homeowner to support the DSO.
I think the problem is, that it feels to me like the slash program was intended more for maintenance mode, for, hey, we had a big spring storm and I've got 3 limbs down in my yard and the pine needles from the season and I've gotta get rid of that, but I'm here for a weekend to rake that up and clean it. I think what he's talking about and I'm talking about is we have several lots that are far more dense and are gonna generate a lot more material than that. So trying to have a slash program that was meant for my one spring pile every year as I do my good deed to clean my lot up, and integrate that to, you have a 10-acre lot that needs to have 100 cubic yards minimum come off of it to be anywhere close to the DSO, they're not really the same thing, right? The slash program was really more, hey, we're gonna keep up with you as you're maintaining your lot over time, not the, we're gonna have 5 contracting crews with heavy equipment generating.
And it wasn't.
Right.
That's what it is scaled at currently,
Right.
but that's not what it was intended for. I was on the fire mitigation committee that started all of that back in 2012, that led to the first ordinance. And we advised, the mitigation committee advised against the ordinance because it was trying to assert teeth, and we knew that you could not keep up with the people that just voluntarily do it, much less force people to do it.
And in the defensible space ordinance and the fire adaptive committee, when we were talking about all these things, one of the sticking points was lot clearing or lot thinning, the lots that didn't have anything to do with defensible space around a structure. We really were targeted in gold towards the availability for insurance and helping people get insurance on their properties and their second homes, et cetera. So we're really hard focused on that. And so we feel like the amount of slash that we created by the defensible space ordinance, we could handle with our current operations. But as soon as, we're gonna have to answer all of these questions when we go to lot thinning and the next phase of whenever we get there, whether that's 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, we're gonna have to face these concerns, and I think the slash program is gonna have to grow exponentially. But we're not gonna know what that rate is until we have a couple of seasons under our belt at our current rates, and we've developed a system to be able to track how many cubic yards we're getting in. I'd like to see a year or two worth of data before we start biting off these big chunks and say, come one, come all, bring us all the slash contractors and
Well, that's what we're-
residents alike.
We don't wanna discourage it,
Correct.
but we also don't wanna over-encourage it, because we don't have the capability of dealing with it. I mean, so another thought, maybe, again, I'm just throwing it out there, maybe the grapple trucks are only used for defensible space assessments. You go out there, you assess it, you can even assess the approximate yardage coming off that property, and the grapple trucks just provide for the DSO.
I think that was the spirit of what we built.
And then vacant lots, new construction, I say that, I mean, then you get into new construction, you're gonna have people finish the house, have the trees all grown up around it, then call for a defensible space, and then come in and thin it so that you'll haul it. I mean, I'm just saying, there's always gonna be workarounds.
Yeah, new construction is also something we could probably manage as well. I don't know how many new construction permits we have, is Reggie here, but I think I heard him say that we had about 20 new construction permits.
This year so far.
This year. So I think it's manageable to be able to do new construction, and we would want to promote that, to handle all the thinning before you build the structure.
Handle it, not pick it up.
I wouldn't be opposed to picking it up
With the
either
grapple
on
trucks?
new construction with grapple trucks.
I guess,
If it's size for the grapple truck.
If it's sized for the grapple truck and it pertains to the defensible space around that structure where the structure is gonna end up being the plat layout, then I think it would be reasonable, because we're gonna do either before or after.
Yeah.
But all the other lots that are in between is the stuff that we can't bite off.
I mean, to me, whether somebody's clearing a lot because they're building a house or whether they're clearing the lot because of the DSO, to me is immaterial. They're clearing a lot. We need to be focused on reducing the fuel, whatever that is. And I know we don't want to get overrun, but at the same time, we can't, we can't try and pitch two different stories. Yeah, we want all your fuel, but on the other hand, you can only bring us this much.
And then it always goes back to the biggest threat are the vacant lots. And under everything that we're discussing, we're almost discouraging.
And even though we're taking a chance of getting inundated, I think this council needs to be ready that if we get inundated, our best response, in my opinion, is to try and figure out a way to solve it. Maybe hiring more staff, maybe burning more frequently, maybe getting some new equipment that needs, that could be needed to dispose of the material. But those are the solutions. I just hate the fact, after Calf Canyon, to think we're gonna do something to slow it down because, I know we have limits, but, I think we need to be prepared to fund this. It's very important to me. Again, I think it's not a matter of if we're gonna have a fire, it's a matter of when.
Well, at a certain point in this DSO's life, the grapple trucks are either gonna have to add more people and staff, or the crews over there doing the burning are gonna have to add more people, staff, equipment, all of it, right?
Potentially.
So it may be that at some point, and particularly on the larger scale lots, that the grapple truck's not the right answer for that giant clearing of a lot for a new construction, that really, if we had a dozen contractors here who were all doing lot thinning services, I bet most homeowners, particularly the remote ones, would opt to pay the contractor who's doing the thinning work to haul it out of there. That's gonna be the most common setup for it. So I guess, what does the grapple truck and slash program need to look like 5 years from now really is to inform what you wanna put in this document today. And it sounds like there may be a change on how we pick up, or if we pick up, or how often we pick up some point in the future, just based on the amount of material alone.
And it also has to do with how we do the wildfire protection fee.
For sure.
Because right now, everybody pays it, but if not everybody has access to the same service,
Yep.
that's not okay.
Would you guys mind if I bring up Brian Lindsay and just offer his thoughts as an outside perspective? Would you mind offering your perspective, sir? And if you have anything to say, please do come up.
Oh, well, thank you. So I'm just tying all that together with my True Value hat on. So I'm doing a homeowner build, right, where I'm the homeowner contractor in the build, and we cleared, with the defensible ordinance in mind, we cleared 200 cubic yards of material.
On a 1 acre lot.
On a 1 acre lot. And to haul that off, and so here's the thing too, it was like, well, is it me and my, buddy, or is he a contractor, so does that count, or is it, there's all those fine lines of it. But by the time but he gave me a price and said, this is the price for the lot, if the village will come pick it up, it's this, but if not, it's gonna be plus, $1,500 more. So when you're going into something like that, it's just seeing that cost is, because it's, as a homeowner, you're doing it to do the principal space, to do the right thing, but you're also looking at the cost of your build and everything associated with it. And if you're paying that price on the, on the wildfire defense, like you said, if everybody's paying the same price, where does that service start and stop? It is worth it to have it hauled off and get it out of there quickly, but it's a lot, and that was probably, that acre probably had a little over half of it covered in trees, and we took half of that. So it was really probably a 1/4 acre of trees, 3/8 maybe, that produced 200 cubic yards of, approximately 200 cubic yards of slash. And it does help people, I think, to make those decisions of how you're gonna do it, because it's, like BJ said, it's easier to do it now than wait until the house is there and then have these high dollar cuts, and you can always come back. But it does help as a, and it was right here too, it was a close one, so it would have been easy. But those are those costs associated with all that. And then from a forestry perspective, yeah, I think you wanna encourage people, like Jake said, yeah, you're gonna clean up these dead down branches, a couple of dead trees. But if people are really coming in and saying, okay, we're gonna try and apply this to our acreage, and we're gonna, like what he's probably about to embark in, you're probably gonna produce 100 or 200 cubic yards just doing a thinning.
So your haul away amount was $1,500 for 200 cubic yards.
Pretty much.
Can we compete or come close to that number with the grapple trucks, or are we playing the wrong ballgame here?
Well, anything would be a plus at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I
If
guess-
we're charging for the grapple truck to make the delivery.
Right, but I guess my point is, we can figure out what the contractors are gonna be charging to haul stuff off, and then back into what it costs for us to go pick it up. It may be more economical when we sit down and
Have them
figure it
haul it
out,
in.
to have the contractor haul it versus having the grapple trucks operating.
And it's like everything, it depends where you're at. This is right
For
behind the
sure.
market.
Yeah, if you're way up on
you know,
Brazos, that
but if
number's
you're
different.
somewhere else, yeah.
But the other thing too is not everybody has access to, I mean, the contractors get busy.
For sure.
They don't have to do it at some point.
And then I noticed here too, it says, and is this right? So, it says any slash cut between November 1st and April 1st must remain on the property or brought into the slash pit. So does that mean you can deliver slash to the slash pit after November 1st?
No, we haven't been accepting it, no.
Okay, well, the way this reads is it says you can.
Yeah, I saw that.
And just to clarify, yeah, I was just curious.
Well, I think part of this, it was written, Mr. Mayor, part of this was written as trying to figure out how to make things better, because again, this is the old policy with some changes to try and improve, but you know, and those are the decisions the council needs to make, because the council could say, we're gonna accept slash year round. Now, we have to make sure we have the money to fund that, but we could do that. And any of this really could be changed by the council. We just kind of worked together and came up with the first shot at something that we thought would be an improvement over the old one. And that's kind of what this represents. So, and this is an administrative policy, which means technically, only I have to accept it. It doesn't have to come to council for acceptance, but as long as it complies with the ordinance, which I found the old one not to comply with the ordinance. But we do want to take this to council, and that's what the reason we're having this meeting, because we want you guys to, you know, you represent the people, you need to have your input. For me, again, I want all the firewood we can take. I would like nothing more than Captain Romo complaining to me because we're getting too much firewood. That would be a good scenario in my mind, sorry. But the biggest challenge, I think, is logistics, because we don't have any way of knowing. Somebody comes in and does a permit, we don't know when they're gonna bring that slash in. We don't know, you know, we're just like winging it, right? And waiting on people to call, or if it's a contractor, they just show up at the gate. To me, that's a bigger problem that needs to be solved. Like if we're gonna require contractors to do slash permits, and then we go out and do an estimate on volume, and I know that's a lot of extra work, but if we can do that, or have them do an estimate on volume, and then give us a time frame and schedule when it's gonna come in, because that's the thing, when you've got, you know, 3 guys burning something in the pit, and all of a sudden you have this, you know, half an acre, an acre's worth of trees come in, you gotta stop what you're doing and go deal with it.
At the same time, you probably have enough experience at this point, you understand the seasons, when it's coming in, I mean, yeah, there's gonna be days. I don't think you're ever gonna get down to I wish I could get them to schedule like that, much less coordinate with the wildland team. But you understand the seasonal aspect of it, and again, I think that's just it, unfortunately. I think what we wanna see is you have a lot more work, and just how to deal with it is the question. And also how we charge for it. So also, I think, our wildfire protection fees, they don't take into account lot size, do they?
They do.
They do.
And on our slash intake form that we just developed, it also has estimate of slash as well. It does not have time frame on there, but we can easily change that.
Or maybe we, I don't know if it's unreasonable, could we say, call us a day in advance, so at least we know a day ahead of time what's coming in?
Mr. Lappin, you would like to say?
Yes, sir.
You want me up there?
Yes, please.
No more burning.
If you don't mind, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Michael Laverty. I'm one of the Brazos guys. I happen to have 43 acres up there that I'm diligently working. I've been working closely with both chiefs on thinning my lot. I think I've been working at it for 4 years now. And we've done some burning, we've done some hauling, we've done some chipping, and I haven't heard any conversation about chipping. And in all of these scenarios, the handling of the slash and the great volumes of slash is probably the biggest cost. And whether it's encouraging an undeveloped lot, a property owner wants to thin their lot, do what's right with the DSO, have them chip it right on site. It's mulch, it just goes right back, don't have to handle it. Last summer, Chief Romo's crew came up and chipped. I had arranged it with them. We've made some piles along my driveway at the lower end, and a couple hours, man, they burned through that. And I said, geez, I wish I had 100 more yards of slash to chip, and we just shot it right out alongside the driveway. Right now, I'm making piles along Brazos, and where we live is a big cut embankment that erodes with the heavy rains and these heavy snows and whatnot. Shoot the stuff right on that embankment and erosion control. You don't have to haul it down. And I would imagine the cost of your heavy-duty chipper probably cheaper than that grapple truck. You know, you can talk about labor and you got all those, a lot of different costs involved there, but I think chipping could be a real viable solution. You don't have the burning in the valley and that tourists complain about and whatnot, and it does just get wasted right back on the site. You don't have to haul it all down to the dump and then burn it there. So,
What chipper was that, Chief or Captain?
We have a 1800 Lemire chipper that I got from a grant, and yeah, that thing goes through big logs. We're trying not to put logs through it because we want a longevity of it, so just,
there could be limitations on that.
Yeah.
Just like you were talking about, maybe an extra fee for the grapple truck or whatever, could be a fee on the chipper. I could see in a few years having, 4 chippers with four two-man crews or something, and you just schedule it, the homeowner schedule it, the chief
And we are chipping if people want that, which they're not. They don't want the chips. They think it's more of a fire hazard. And right now, this is a real life experience success story from Mike. It's not a fire hazard. The placement where we do it, and we're not putting it in one area. We're kind of putting it in different areas, and we're making sure the fuel depth isn't that much.
I think the only fire hazard was if you had a mountain and that internal combustion, whatever started a fire, but
And I'll be honest, I
a few
didn't know
inches.
aware that you were offering that.
Yeah, it's on the permit itself. Is the contractor going to deliver it, or do you want us to chip on site, or are we gonna pick it up with a grab?
But chip on site's only for slash and diameters up to,
yeah, you'd have to have limitations.
Yeah, there's
on that.
limitations on that.
You
But that
still-
would handle it.
the pine needles still gotta go, there's nothing to do with the pine needles, but haul them, right?
Well, yeah, the ones off the ground, yeah, it has to go, but the ones on the
limbs
and all
just
that,
go right
those
through it
go
and they
right
just,
through,
again, become mulch. But anyway, I just think that's an option very worth considering and maybe expanding. You don't have all that crap coming down to the dump. And so, anyway, I've been very happy working with these guys, and we've had a good back and forth on this, and I think that's the way it should go with everybody in the community. If you, like you say, you want to make it friendly for people to be involved, and if anything, have a carrot rather than a stick, and encourage them to get out there and clean their lot. Say, go put your picnic table, bring your RV up for a week in the summertime and enjoy your lot instead of all these vacant lots that have 60 years worth of debris on them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
think we're making some progress here, but I think there's still a lot of discussion that needs to be had, or revisions. I would ask, well, obviously, our policy and our ordinance need to align. We can't have discrepancies from one to the other. And two, just for my benefit, if we do this again, if you wouldn't mind redlining existing with proposed changes. But, yeah, just like this document, without having the other one in front of me, just for my benefit. So they have a better understanding of what we're looking at.
I think you're on the right track. I think it's just making sure that the program flows and grows easily as we can make it within reason.
So, I'm sorry, Bill.
No, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I was just gonna say, of course, with your approval and that of the council, I'd like to direct Captain Romo to rewrite the ordinance. Keep in mind, this is something, we just wanted y'all to have something to look at that gave you information. It was ideas, it wasn't anything in stone. But I would like to direct Captain Romo to rewrite the slash portion of the solid waste ordinance and to take these ideas into consideration. There are things we can look at because there are bigger chippers that we could manage. The challenge with the chipper is, again, you're gonna have to schedule resources, and does it take 3 people or 2?
You could do it with 2, but I recommend 3.
I think you have to have 3 for OSHA, because there has to be somebody not working, watching.
So I'll just point out a few. I remember revisiting this a year ago, and Director Epler can really attest to this. Not only when we thin a lot, when somebody properly thins a lot, it's almost as if a fire went through, and so erosion becomes an issue. And if those chips are too high, or in other words, if all the slash is brought down to the road and then just shot back up, all that goes in.
The stumps are removed.
And it goes into the bar ditches and clogs up culverts, clogs up ditches. We have to be careful not to create other issues. Again, just thinning properly, water runs off the lot at a much higher rate than before they're thin. So we have to take all that into account. I think the chipping has its application, the grapple truck has its, and I understand the limitations, but what I would like to focus on personally is just based on how we charge. I don't want to offer one service to one lot owner and not to another, whether there's a house on it or not, because they all pay that fee. So unless we revisit that, then I think we need to find a way that we can answer every owner's needs equally. But that's all I have.
I'm glad that you have the option, you're giving the homeowners the option of chipping, because here's several years ago when solid waste was still handling slash, and I was talking to the person in charge at the time, and there was a contractor here for a short period of time who had some kind of equipment that chipped, and they would smooth it out. But, and like you say, though, it works really well on flat lots, but you don't want it on.
Or a large amount near the bar ditch.
This was all spread, and he said, if you've got time, Bill, I want to take you up to a lot, which was way up here somewhere. And he said, it was a couple of years ago, and he said, grass is growing on that lot now, it's just like a meadow. And he drove me up there, and we walked around, and I said, good grief. I mean, you couldn't even tell there were chips there after a couple of years. And grass was growing, and it was really nice. But it was a pretty much flat lot, so you didn't have, you wouldn't want to do it and have a, you know, during our monsoon season and have it all wash into the ditch. I don't think Kurt would like that too much.
Mayor, I will tell you also that when I was working with the Cimarron Watershed Alliance on their $10 million grant that they got for thinning. One of the concerns expressed in those meetings was that if you have too much chipping, It actually is an attractant to bark beetles. So if you have too much chips on the ground, you can actually attract them. They smell all that fresh wood and then they come, and it can be detrimental to your forest, so I'm told.
Again, I think we have to look at every option, and also be aggressive, with our lobbying efforts, grant writing, to secure any funding we can, to help grow this program, because we all agree how important it is. Like Jake said, it's not a matter of if, but when, so. With that, is there anything else anyone would like to add?
Kurt?
Director Epler?
Yeah. I was gonna try to be quiet, chief.
Try. The key word is try.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council, Clerk Strickland, and Manager Weir. I want to make it clear that, particularly on the erosion issue, that yes, we are aware that there's a problem, but as this is the way I do things, as opposed to trying to limit slash removal, you know, we need to be aware of what this, what needs to be done to make sure that we don't inhibit anybody's desire or ability to thin their lots. It is very apparent that it has an effect on drainage once lots are thinned. A prime example of this is in the Aspen subdivision, which was done in the late 90s. Well, when it was designed and done, that whole area was very heavily forested, and a lot of their drainage design was at this point obviously inadequate. So it was obvious, you know, and since there's been, I would say, venture to say, millions of dollars spent on some of those large lots up there, thinning them. And it's great, because I also was on a dozer on the fire on the south end of that subdivision and was glad to see lots thinned out. But there are drainage components that, due to this extra drainage, are undersized. Where my approach is, okay, what do we got to do to upsize that drainage and get it working right? But on the individual job basis, a few things, and I've given this a lot of thought, and have even mentioned something that we need to consider is erosion control on these larger projects that are gonna be thinned out, where there's gonna be a period of time where the green grass isn't growing. I know in construction, it's kind of rule of thumb, if your scope of your project is an area greater than 1 acre, that you need to implement a SWIP plan. And a SWIP plan is essentially, it's a paperwork process with the government, but acts that you need to do within that plan do have a purpose. Installation of wattles, silt fence, best measurement practices. Something that I think should be discussed is if a thinning project is gonna be done mechanically, especially where all the slash is gonna be removed with equipment, it's very intrusive to the soil, it disturbs a lot of soil. And I know when work is done on national forest or state forest, logging operations, you go in and have a logging road, there is a process of berming and reclamation of all those roads. We see these roads appear on individual thinning projects when people go in with equipment, which is a very efficient and effective way to thin lots, but it has an impact, especially when the ground's muddy, so forth and so on. The other thing that, one of the downsides of some of the processes in mechanical thinning is, and I've done this myself, you go in with an excavator, knock the tree down, stump and everything, and then you have the stumps to deal with. But also in removing that stumpage, you're destabilizing the soil and you're loosening more of it up. So another thing that I think should be considered is that if we encourage people, if they're doing full tree removal, that it should primarily be for new house construction and driveways going in, and recommend to people that if they have the opportunity and the equipment to do so, if they're able to cut trees and leave the stumps in place to naturally deteriorate, it's gonna keep the soil stabilized. But jumping back to the SWIP scenario, I don't know if we really want to get into that. We don't currently have anything in place requiring people to do SWIP on building projects. But I think that there's probably a way that we can educate people that, plain and simple, it's the right thing to do if we're going to go in and really disturb the soil on a lot, to find a way to contain it until vegetation can reestablish itself. But also, I think on the larger projects, they should also include not just an erosion control plan, but this would actually be included in an erosion control plan, but a reseeding plan, and be able to provide recommendations for methods and seeding mix. There are seeding mixes that don't work up here. It's very easy to get the most productive seed mix from State Forestry. They have that information. So again, I don't wanna say, yeah, all this thinning's gonna ruin my roads. I wanna figure out a way to slow the erosion down, but also fix my roads to accommodate the increased flow.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anything else I'd like to add? Thank you, everybody, for coming. This meeting is adjourned.
Recording stopped.
Looking at Brad, I thought he was fixing to start with, I was like, is he on the agenda, or is the manager's report coming up?